close your eyes now and let yourself drift back to a different time. To September 2008, to the gleaming towers of Manhattan, where the air itself seemed to hum with money and ambition, where 25,000 people moved through corridors of glass and steel, believing, truly believing, that their world was unshakable. This is a story about the end of something, not just a company, though a company does end, not just a career, though careers are shattered. This is a story about the moment when confidence, that invisible architecture that holds the financial world together, simply vanishes, like fog burning away in sunlight, like a dream dissolving upon waking. At the center of this world stood Richard Fuld, Richard Severin Fuld Jr., to use his full name, though almost no one did, Dick to his friends, though he had fewer friends than allies, the gorilla to those who feared him, and many did. He was born in April of 1946, in the aftermath of one world war, and at the beginning of a cold one. He grew up in a world where America was ascendant, where finance was becoming the engine of everything, where young men with sharp minds and sharper elbows could build empires from nothing but numbers and nerve. For 40 years, his life had been bound to Lehman Brothers. 40 years. Think about that for a moment. Longer than most marriages, longer than most people stay in any single career. He had joined the firm in his 20s, climbed every rung of the ladder, witnessed mergers and acquisitions and near-death experiences. He had been there when Lehman merged with Kuhn, Loeb and Company, there when American Express acquired them, there when they merged with E.F. Hutton, and there, crucially, in 1994, when American Express spun Lehman Brothers off as an independent company once again. That's when Fuld became CEO. That's when his real reign began. They called him the gorilla, not with affection, but with a kind of fearful respect. He was known for his intimidating presence, his refusal to back down, his absolute conviction in his own judgment. He had steered the firm through the Asian crisis of 1997, when Lehman's stock dropped to $12, and everyone thought the end had come, but Fuld held steady. He had navigated the chaos when long-term capital management collapsed in 1998, when the entire financial system teetered on the edge. But Lehman survived. 14 consecutive years of profit followed. 14 years. The firm grew and grew, expanding into every corner of the financial markets. By 2007, Lehman Brothers reported earnings of $4.2 billion. $4 billion. The stock price soared. Fuld himself was named the #1 CEO in the brokers and asset managers category by Institutional Investor magazine in 2006. He was 62 years old that September of 2008. At the peak of his power, at the peak of his wealth, his compensation over the previous 8 years had exceeded $260 million. He owned a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, a ranch spanning more than 40 acres in Sun Valley, Idaho, a home on Jupiter Island, Florida, an apartment on Park Avenue in Manhattan, and everything, absolutely everything, he had built was about to disappear. Let yourself breathe slowly now, in and out. Picture the Hudson River at dawn, that particular quality of light that touches the water before the city fully wakes. The towers of lower Manhattan rising against a September sky. The air is still warm. Summer hasn't quite released its grip on the city, but there's a hint of autumn in the early morning breeze. That sense of change coming, of seasons turning. It's Friday morning, September 12th, 2008. Richard Fuld's driver picks him up before sunrise. The streets are still quiet, the city not yet awake. In the back seat of the town car, Fuld reviews documents on his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating his face in the darkness. He's always been an early riser, always been the first one in, the last one out. That's how you build an empire. That's how you stay on top. The car pulls up to 745 7th Avenue. Lehman's headquarters, not their original home. They'd been forced to relocate after September 11th, 2001, when their offices in the World Trade Center complex were destroyed. That day is still vivid in memory. Lehman had occupied 3 floors of One World Trade Center, floors 38 through 40. They'd lost 1 employee in the attacks. Their global headquarters in 3 World Financial Center had been severely damaged, rendered unusable by falling debris. Over 6,500 employees displaced in an instant. Fuld remembers that day with crystalline clarity. Standing on the trading floor when the first plane hit, the confusion, the disbelief, then the second plane, and the sudden understanding that this was no accident, the evacuation, the crowds in the streets, the sound, that terrible sound when the towers fell, and afterward, in the days that followed, the scramble to resume operations. Trading desks set up in hotel rooms, the entire investment banking division converting the Sheraton Manhattan Hotel into temporary office space, all 665 guest rooms transformed into workstations. Employees working from home via virtual private networks, sharing office space through flex-time arrangements. But they had survived. That was the thing about Lehman Brothers. They survived. They adapted. They endured. The firm had been founded in 1850. For God's sake, 158 years of history. Survived the Civil War. Survived 2 world wars. Survived the Great Depression. Survived the crash of 1987. Survived the dot-com bubble. Survived September 11th. Surely they would survive this. Fuld enters through the executive entrance. Security nods to him. They know him. Of course. Everyone knows him. He takes the elevator up to the executive floors, and already he can feel the tension in the building. It's like a change in air pressure before a storm. Something electric and dangerous. In his office, Fuld looks out over Manhattan. From this height, the 45th floor, the city appears orderly, rational. Yellow taxis moving in neat lines. Pedestrians like ants following predetermined paths. Buildings rising in geometric precision against the sky. From up here, you could believe that the world makes sense, that systems hold, that empires last. But he knows better. His assistant brings him coffee, black, no sugar, and the morning briefing. The news is not good. The news hasn't been good for months, but today it's worse. The firm's stock had closed at $38 the day before, plummeting 45% in a single trading session. 45%. In one day, Lehman Brothers stock had been trading at $86 a share in February of 2007, just 18 months ago. At that price, the company had a market capitalization of nearly $60 billion. $60 billion. Now, in September of 2008, that value has evaporated like morning mist. Rumors swirl through the markets like autumn leaves caught in an updraft. Lehman is finished. Lehman can't meet its obligations. Lehman has marked its assets too high, hiding massive losses in real estate holdings that are worth far less than the balance sheet claims. Lehman is the next to fall. Some of the rumors are true. That's the thing about rumors in a crisis. They're often based on fragments of truth, magnified and distorted but not entirely fabricated. Let your shoulders release their tension now. Feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort as the story unfolds. The thing about a bank, any bank, but especially an investment bank, is that it lives on confidence, on the belief that tomorrow will come, that money lent today will return with interest, that the institution itself is permanent, solid, trustworthy. When that belief begins to crack, everything unravels with terrifying speed, and Lehman's foundation had been cracking for months. The firm held over $111 billion in commercial and residential real estate assets. $111 billion. To put that in perspective, that was more than double what they had held at the end of the previous year. In the midst of a collapsing housing market, While other banks were desperately trying to shed their real estate exposure, Lehman had been buying more, accumulating more, betting bigger and bigger that the market would turn around. It hadn't turned around. The subprime mortgage crisis had started quietly, almost imperceptibly, back in 2006. Borrowers, especially subprime borrowers, those with poor credit who had been lured into mortgages they couldn't afford, began to miss payments. At first, it was a trickle, then a stream, then a flood. Housing prices, which had climbed year after year in what seemed like an eternal ascent, began to fall. And when housing prices fall, mortgage-backed securities, those complex financial instruments that bundle thousands of mortgages together and slice them into tradable pieces, become toxic. Lehman Brothers had been deeply, profoundly involved in the mortgage-backed securities business. They had originated subprime mortgages through subsidiaries they'd acquired. In 2003, Fuld had led the firm aggressively into loan origination. They bought several lenders, several of whom focused on providing the subprime loans that the government had been pushing since the turn of the century. They had bundled those mortgages into securities. They had sold those securities to investors around the world, and they had kept large positions in those securities on their own books, especially the lower-rated, harder-to-sell tranches. Now those assets were toxic, impossible to sell at anything close to their stated value, yet impossible to hide forever. In June, just 3 months ago, Lehman had announced a second-quarter loss of $2.8 billion, their first quarterly loss since being spun off from American Express 14 years earlier. $2.8 billion vanished. The market had reacted with shock. This was Lehman Brothers, one of the bulge bracket investment banks, one of the pillars of Wall Street. If Lehman could post losses like that, what else was hiding beneath the surface? The announcement had come on June 9th, a Monday. Fuld remembers the trading floor that day, the silence that fell when the numbers were released. A loss of $2.8 billion in a single quarter. But the firm also announced that it had raised $6 billion in additional capital. Surely that would be enough. Surely that would tide them over until the market stabilized. But it hadn't been enough. Because the problem wasn't just the losses they'd already taken. It was the losses still to come. The assets still on the books that would need to be written down further. The positions they couldn't exit without triggering even more catastrophic losses. And then there was the leverage. Investment banks operate on leverage, borrowing vast sums to amplify their investments. When things are going well, leverage magnifies your profits. But when things turn bad, leverage consumes your capital with terrifying speed. At its peak, Lehman had been leveraged 30-1. For every dollar of equity capital, they had borrowed $30. It meant that even small losses could wipe out your capital base entirely. Breathe in the stillness now. Let the story carry you deeper. Fuld had watched it happen to Bear Stearns in March. Bear Stearns, the fifth largest investment bank in America, had simply run out of cash. Their business model, like Lehman's, depended on short-term borrowing. Every day, they would borrow billions of dollars in the overnight lending markets, using that money to fund their trading operations, their investments, their positions, and every day, they would pay that money back and borrow fresh billions the next day. It's called a repurchase agreement, or repo, in Wall Street shorthand. You sell securities with an agreement to buy them back the next day at a slightly higher price. The difference is the interest. It's how investment banks fund themselves. But it only works if lenders have confidence. If lenders believe you'll be there tomorrow to buy back those securities. If lenders trust that you're solvent, that your assets are worth what you say they're worth, that you're not about to collapse. In March, Bear Stearns' lenders lost confidence. Suddenly, overnight, the borrowing dried up. Bear couldn't fund itself. The firm had assets, plenty of assets, but no cash, no liquidity. They couldn't make it through a single day. the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department arranged an emergency sale to J.P. Morgan Chase over a single weekend. $2 a share. Bear Stearns, which had been trading at $172 a share just a year earlier, sold for $2, later raised to $10 after shareholders complained. But still, the firm was gone, absorbed, erased. 16,000 employees suddenly working for J.P. Morgan or out on the street looking for new jobs. That had set a precedent, a dangerous precedent. If you were big enough, important enough, connected enough, surely the government would step in. Surely they would arrange a rescue. Surely they wouldn't let a major investment bank actually fail. Surely. But Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, Lehman's chief rival, had been clear with Fuld in the months after Bear Stearns. Crystal clear. He'd told Fuld in no uncertain terms there would be no government bailout for Lehman. Your firm needs to do a deal, Paulson had said. Find a buyer, merge with another bank, sell yourself, raise capital, do something, but don't expect us to save you. Don't wait for a rescue that isn't coming. Fuld had heard the words. But had he believed them? That's the question that would haunt the quiet moments in the months and years to come. Did he truly believe the government would let Lehman Brothers fail? Or did some part of him assume, despite Paulson's warnings, that when push came to shove, when the crisis reached its peak, they would step in? They would have to step in, because Lehman was too big, too interconnected, too important, too big to fail. The firm had $639 billion in assets, $613 billion in debts. It had 25,000 employees worldwide. It held at least $40 billion in direct client assets, including money from some of the largest hedge funds in the world. It was deeply connected to every other major financial institution through derivatives, contracts, repurchase agreements, credit default swaps. If Lehman went down, the ripple effects would be catastrophic. Surely they knew that. Surely Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke and Treasury officials understood the systemic risk. Surely they were bluffing when they said no bailout. Surely, at the last possible moment, they would blink. That's what Fuld believed, or wanted to believe, or convinced himself he believed. Let your breathing deepen. Feel yourself sinking into comfort, into the story unfolding like a dream now. So this weekend, this last weekend, is about finding a savior, finding someone to buy Lehman Brothers, or merge with it, or inject enough capital to survive until the storm passes. The phone calls had started weeks ago, months ago really. Fuld had been searching for a solution since the spring. Korea Development Bank had been one possibility. A state-owned South Korean bank with deep pockets and global ambitions. Their teams had flown in from Seoul, spent weeks examining Lehman's books, asking questions, conducting due diligence. For a while, in August, it looked promising. Lehman's stock had actually climbed on rumors of the deal, 16% in 1 week on hope alone. On August 22nd, shares closed up 5% for the day, 16% for the week, as reports circulated that Korea Development Bank was seriously considering buying the firm. Then the deal started to unravel. Korea Development Bank was facing difficulties pleasing regulators, having trouble attracting partners to share the risk. The South Korean government was getting cold feet about such a massive overseas acquisition in the middle of a global financial crisis. When the news broke on September 9th, this past Tuesday, that Korea Development Bank had put talks on hold, Lehman's stock plunged 45% in a single day. 45%. The share price dropped to $7.79, single digits, for a firm that had been trading above $80 just 18 months earlier. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the most successful investor in American history. Back in March, right around the time Bear Stearns was collapsing, Buffett had approached Fuld with an offer. He would invest $4 billion in Lehman Brothers, preferred shares, $40 each, with a 9% annual dividend. Let's do the math on that for a moment. Slowly, calmly. $4 billion at 9% means Buffett would receive $360 million per year in dividends, every year. Just for investing in Lehman, it was expensive money, very expensive, but it would have been a vote of confidence from the greatest investor alive. It would have steadied the markets, shown that Warren Buffett believed in Lehman Brothers. On the day Buffett made that offer, Lehman's stock closed at less than $38. So Buffett was actually offering more than the market price. You'd think Fuld would have jumped at it. He said no, not enough, he told his board, not reflective of Lehman's true value. The share price was depressed by fear and rumors, not by fundamentals. Lehman was worth more. Taking Buffett's deal would be admitting weakness, would be selling at the bottom. Now, in September, with the stock in free fall and bankruptcy looming, that decision haunted the quiet moments. Those late-night hours when sleep wouldn't come and the mind replayed decisions over and over, searching for the moment when a different choice might have changed everything. But you don't become the gorilla by showing weakness. You don't run a bulge bracket investment bank for 14 years by accepting less than you believe you're worth. Confidence, even in the face of disaster, is what separates leaders from followers. That's what Fuld had always believed. And there's another layer to this, another dynamic that shaped decisions in those crucial months. Fuld had what one former Lehman trader would later describe as a smoldering envy of Goldman Sachs. Goldman, where Paulson had been CEO before becoming Treasury Secretary. Goldman, which seemed to glide through every crisis unscathed. Goldman, which always seemed one step ahead, always on the right side of trades, always protected. Fuld wanted Lehman to be respected like Goldman, valued like Goldman. He wasn't going to accept a deal that made Lehman look weak, that suggested the firm was worth less than its competitors. Pride, that ancient sin, that timeless flaw, it shapes so many stories, doesn't it? The refusal to bend. The conviction that you're right, even when the evidence mounts that you're wrong. The belief that accepting help is weakness rather than wisdom. The morning passes in a blur of conference calls. Let yourself feel time moving differently now, the way it does in crisis. Minutes stretching into hours, hours compressing into moments. Fuld speaks with his inner circle. Bart McDade, the president and chief operating officer. Ian Lowett, the chief financial officer. Hugh Skip McGee, the head of investment banking. These are the men who know everything, who understand just how dire the situation really is. There had been a management shakeup back in June. Joe Gregory, the longtime president and COO, Fuld's right hand for years, had been forced to resign. Aaron Callan, who had been CFO for barely 6 months, was pushed out at the same time. The board and senior executives had essentially stripped Fuld of his authority for a brief moment, forcing him to make changes. It was a humiliation, but a necessary one, they said. The firm needed fresh leadership, needed people who understood the scope of the crisis, needed to show the markets that Lehman was taking the situation seriously. The story of how it happened reveals the tensions within the firm. Skip McGee, the head of investment banking, had organized a meeting of senior staff, behind Fuld's back, essentially staging a kind of coup. McGee and others felt that Gregory and Callan weren't taking the crisis seriously enough, weren't being realistic about the firm's position. They forced Fuld to demote both executives. Gregory agreed to resign. Callan was told she had to step down as CFO. So Bart McDade had taken over as president. He'd brought back risk managers who had been pushed out earlier for being too cautious, for not taking enough risk. Michael Gelband and Alex Kirk, executives who had warned about the real estate exposure, who had been sidelined by Gregory and his allies. Now they were back, trying desperately to salvage what they could. But was it too late? By August, Lehman announced plans to cut 6% of its workforce, 1,500 people, just ahead of the third quarter reporting deadline in September. It was a sign of how serious things had become. Lehman Brothers, which had been growing year after year, adding employees and offices and expanding globally, was now shrinking, contracting, fighting for survival. Friday afternoon, word comes down. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson has summoned the titans of Wall Street to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for an emergency meeting this weekend. The New York Fed, that imposing stone building downtown, that fortress where the largest stockpile of gold in the world sits in underground vaults, a place of power, of last resorts. The list of attendees reads like a who's who of American finance. Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan Chase, Lloyd Blankfein from Goldman Sachs, John Thain from Merrill Lynch, Vikram Pandit from Citigroup, John Mack from Morgan Stanley, Fuld's closest ally among the competitors, his friend, or as close to a friend as you can have on Wall Street, Brady Dugan from Credit Suisse, and others, the CEOs and top executives from every major financial institution in New York. They're being asked to come together, to pool resources, to absorb Lehman's toxic assets collectively, to make a deal, any deal, palatable for whoever might buy the firm. It's an extraordinary request. These are competitors, after all. Rivals who spend their days trying to win business from each other, to poach each other's best traders and bankers, to gain every advantage they can. But Paulson is asking them to set that aside, for the good of the system, for the stability of the markets, for the survival of confidence itself. Because if Lehman falls, truly falls, in a disorderly bankruptcy, no one knows what happens next. Let yourself release any tension remaining in your body. Feel it draining away like water. Friday afternoon becomes Friday evening. Now it's down to two potential saviors: Bank of America and Barclays. Bank of America, one of the largest banks in the United States, with retail branches across the country and ambitions to become a truly global investment banking powerhouse. Their CEO, Ken Lewis, has been aggressive about acquisitions. He'd bought MBNA in 2005, bought U.S. Trust in 2006. He's not afraid of big deals. And Barclays, the British banking giant, with roots going back to 1690, they've been trying to expand their investment banking operations, trying to compete with American firms on Wall Street. Buying Lehman Brothers would catapult them to the top tier overnight. Both banks are examining Lehman's books. Both have teams working through the night, poring over documents. Somewhere in conference rooms and hotel suites, analysts are sitting at laptops with spreadsheets open, trying to value assets that are nearly impossible to value: collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, commercial real estate holdings in a collapsing market. How much are these assets actually worth? Not what Lehman says they're worth on the balance sheet. Everyone knows those numbers are optimistic, perhaps wildly so. But what would they fetch in a real sale? What would someone actually pay? That's what the due diligence teams are trying to figure out. And the answer determines everything. Because if the assets are worth less than Lehman claims, and they almost certainly are, then someone has to absorb the difference. Someone has to take the loss. The question is who? Paulson's plan is for the Wall Street banks to pool together and create a fund, like they did for long-term capital management back in 1998. The healthy banks would contribute billions to absorb Lehman's worst assets, the truly toxic stuff. That would make the firm attractive enough for Bank of America or Barclays to buy the rest. It's happening, Fuld tells himself. A rescue is being assembled. The titans of Wall Street are gathering downtown at the Fed. Money is being pooled. A deal is being structured. This is how the system works. This is how crises are averted. Everyone comes together at the last moment, takes a piece of the pain, and the system survives. Fuld allows himself a moment of cautious hope. Just a moment. A slight release of the tension that's been building for months. But there's something he doesn't know yet, something that's being discussed in other offices, other conference rooms, among people who will decide his fate without consulting him. Paulson has decided that Lehman will not receive government assistance. No bailout, no backstop, no Federal Reserve loans to keep the firm liquid while a deal is worked out. The government will facilitate a private sector solution, but it will not put taxpayer money at risk. Not after the controversy of saving Bear Stearns. Not after the criticism Paulson received for using government resources to bail out Wall Street. This weekend, Lehman Brothers is on its own. Close your eyes more fully now. Let the tension of the day release into darkness. Friday evening becomes Friday night. Bank of America's team continues its due diligence, but troubling news filters back. They've identified $40 billion in troubled assets on Lehman's books. $40 billion. More than anyone expected. More than the initial estimates suggested. Assets that are worth far, far less than Lehman has them marked. The Wall Street titans gathered at the Fed can raise about $33 billion together. They've agreed to that much, each firm contributing based on their size and strength. JP Morgan a certain amount. Goldman, another amount, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, all of them putting money into a pool to absorb Lehman's toxic assets. But $33 billion isn't enough to cover $40 billion in losses. Someone would need to come up with another $7 billion. And Bank of America is making it clear that they won't take that risk. They're interested in buying Lehman, but not if it means taking losses they can't quantify. Not if it means betting billions on assets that might be worth even less than current estimates suggest. In the corridors of power, in the boardrooms with their leather chairs and mahogany tables, conversations continue deep into the night. Fuld makes calls, receives calls. The hours blur. Sleep becomes impossible. Coffee grows cold in expensive cups. On the trading floor, now empty, lit only by emergency lighting and the glow of screens left running, silence has replaced the usual cacophony. If traders were there, they would see the numbers. Lehman's stock. Lehman's credit default swaps spreading wider, the cost of insuring against the firm's debt skyrocketing because everyone knows what's coming. But the trading floor is empty. It's the weekend. Monday is a lifetime away. Fuld stays in his office. There's nowhere else to be. Home feels impossibly distant. His wife, his family, they're in a different world right now, a world of normal concerns and everyday rhythms. He can't go back there. Not yet. Not until this is resolved. He thinks about the 40 years he's spent at this firm. 40 years. His entire adult life. He started as a young trader in the commercial paper department, worked his way up through sales and trading, became head of fixed income, then head of equities, then CO, then CEO. Every promotion a vindication, every year of profit a triumph. The firm's stock price rising and rising, making him wealthy beyond imagination. Making the firm a powerhouse that rivaled Goldman Sachs, that competed globally, that was respected and feared in every major financial center. And now it's all coming apart, not over years, but over days, hours, even. The firm is being measured in hours now. How many hours until the Asian markets open? How many hours until Monday morning in New York? Breathe slowly, in and out. Feel yourself floating. Saturday, September 13th. The sun rises over a city that doesn't yet know it's about to witness history. Fuld returns to the office, though he barely left it. He looks older than he did yesterday. The strain shows in the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. The news trickles in gradually, then all at once. Bank of America is backing away. They're underwater by billions, they say. The assets are worth too little. The risk is too great. But wait, they're still in discussions. Perhaps they'll reconsider. Hope flickers, refuses to die entirely. Then another blow. John Thane from Merrill Lynch, one of the executives who'd been at the Fed meetings, who'd been part of the discussions about pooling money to save Lehman, has pulled out. He's cut a deal with Bank of America for Merrill Lynch. Think about that for a moment. Bank of America was supposed to be looking at Lehman, was supposed to be conducting due diligence on Lehman, was supposed to be Lehman's potential savior, but instead, they're buying Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch, sensing their own doom if Lehman falls, has approached Bank of America over the weekend. If Lehman goes bankrupt, the panic will spread. Merrill could be next. So Thane makes a desperate call, offers to sell Merrill to Bank of America. And Bank of America, after looking at Lehman's toxic balance sheet, decides that Merrill is the better deal. Cleaner assets, less risk, a better fit. The deal comes together over Saturday and Sunday. $50 billion. Bank of America will buy Merrill Lynch for approximately $50 billion in stock, about half what Merrill was worth in early 2007. But still, it's a lifeline. Merrill will survive. 35,000 jobs will eventually be cut in the combined firm, but the institution will endure. One of Lehman's chief rivals will be saved while Lehman is left to drown. The irony tastes like copper in the mouth. That leaves only Barclays. The British bank seems willing. Their team works through Saturday night. The deal takes shape. Barclays will buy Lehman Brothers, take on the assets, save the 25,000 jobs, prevent the catastrophe. Robert Diamond, Barclays' investment banking head, is leading the negotiations. He sees the opportunity, Lehman Brothers for a fraction of its value. Instant entry into the top tier of Wall Street. All the talent, all the relationships, all the infrastructure. Yes, there are bad assets, but the consortium of Wall Street banks will absorb those. Barclays would get the good parts, the parts that still work. Fuld feels the relief flooding through him. It's almost over. They'll survive. He'll survive. The 158-year-old firm will continue. Under different ownership. Yes, he'll be out, almost certainly. But the firm will live. The jobs will be saved. The systemic crisis will be averted. Saturday night bleeds into Sunday morning. Lawyers are drafting contracts. Accountants are finalizing numbers. Bankers are structuring the deal. It's happening. It's really happening. Fuld allows himself to imagine Monday morning. The press release announcing Barclays' acquisition of Lehman Brothers. The market's relief. The stock prices recovering. The fear subsiding. He'll be vilified, probably. He'll be blamed for the losses, for the near catastrophe. But he'll have saved the firm, found a buyer, prevented the worst. That's something. That counts for something. Let yourself drift deeper now. Feel the weight of your body against the bed. Sunday, September 14th. Morning light filters through the windows of 745 7th Avenue. Fuld waits for the final confirmation. The paperwork, the handshakes, the press release that will announce Lehman's survival. The call comes just after noon. The British government has blocked the deal. Let those words sink in for a moment. The British government has blocked the deal. The Financial Services Authority in London, the banking regulator, refuses to waive regulations requiring Barclays shareholders to approve such a large acquisition. That approval would require a shareholder vote. And a shareholder vote would take weeks to organize. Lehman doesn't have weeks. Lehman has hours. The Bank of England, Britain's central bank, won't provide a backstop, won't guarantee Lehman's obligations even temporarily while the shareholder vote is organized. Without guarantees, without emergency support, Barclays cannot and will not complete the transaction. The Chancellor of the Exchequer has concerns. The Prime Minister has concerns. Why should the United Kingdom take on the risk of an American bank's bad assets? Why should British taxpayers be put at risk to save an American investment bank that made reckless bets on American real estate? The deal is dead. Fuld stands very still when he hears the news. He's in his office. The phone is in his hand. On the other end, someone is talking, explaining, but he's stopped hearing the words. There's a ringing in his ears. A strange sense of unreality, like he's watching himself from outside his own body. Around him, the office has gone quiet. People know. Word spreads through a building the way smoke spreads through a house. Invisible, but everywhere at once. Impossible to contain. There are no more options, no more phone calls to make, no more deals to pursue. Bank of America has bought Merrill Lynch. Barclays has been blocked by the British government. Korea Development Bank is out. Warren Buffett's offer was rejected months ago and won't be coming back. No other bidders have emerged. No white knight is riding to the rescue. It's over. Breathe in the stillness. The story is almost complete. Sunday afternoon. Fuld calls his attorney, Harvey Miller. Harvey Miller is the best bankruptcy lawyer in New York. The best in the country, probably. If you're a major corporation facing insolvency, Harvey Miller is who you call. Miller is incredulous when he understands what's being asked of him. Prepare a bankruptcy petition for Lehman Brothers, a firm with $639 billion in assets, $613 billion in debts. The largest bankruptcy filing in American history. Miller tells Fuld it would be like the United States government going bankrupt. An unprecedented catastrophe. A bankruptcy of this size and complexity would take years to unwind. Decades. Probably. The legal proceedings would be nightmarishly complicated. There would be hundreds of thousands of creditors, millions of transactions to sort through, disputes over every asset, every contract, every claim. Do it anyway, Fuld says. There's no emotion in his voice now, no fight left, just a kind of terrible clarity. This is what's happening. This is what must be done. All that remains is to execute the mechanics of it. Miller begins drafting the papers. He'll need to work through the night. The firm will file first thing Monday morning, before the markets open, before the chaos truly begins. By evening, employees begin arriving at headquarters voluntarily, even though it's Sunday. They've received emails. They've heard rumors. The word is out. If Lehman files for bankruptcy on Monday morning, they won't be able to enter the building. Security will lock them out. Bankruptcy law requires it. The building, the trading floor, the offices, everything becomes part of the bankruptcy estate, off limits until the court approves access. So they come to collect their belongings. Photographs of children, weddings, vacations, awards and certificates, coffee mugs with company logos, plants that have sat on desks for years, the small personal artifacts that make an office feel like a second home. The trading floor is packed now, but nobody is working. Some people are crying, young associates who just started this year, who gave up other job offers to come to Lehman because it was a prestigious firm, a bulge bracket bank, a place where you could build a career. Now they're unemployed. Their stock options worthless. Their signing bonuses probably clawed back. Some are drinking beer, someone found in a conference room refrigerator. Someone else breaks out a bottle of scotch from an executive office. Why not? What are they going to do? Fire us? Some simply stand, staring at screens that show the death of their careers, their savings, their futures. Many employees had substantial holdings of Lehman stock. Part of their compensation was paid in stock. They'd been encouraged to invest in the company, told it was a good long-term bet. Now those shares are worth nothing. Retirement accounts wiped out. College funds evaporated. Down payments on homes lost. 25,000 people employed worldwide. Most will lose their jobs by Tuesday. Some will land at other firms quickly. Barclays and Nomura will eventually buy pieces of Lehman and hire some of the staff. But thousands will be out of work for months, years, some of them. The receptionist on the executive floor, a woman who's worked at Lehman for 23 years, sits at her desk crying quietly. She's 57 years old. How do you find a new job at 57 in the middle of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression? A junior trader, maybe 26 years old, packs up his desk with robotic efficiency. He'd been working on a PhD in physics before deciding that finance would be more lucrative. Now he wonders if he should have stayed in academia. At least you can't go bankrupt, teaching physics, a managing director in equity derivatives, a woman who'd worked her way up from an analyst position over 15 years, stands at the window looking out over Manhattan. She'd made managing director 2 years ago. It had been the proudest moment of her career. Her parents had flown in from Ohio for the celebration. Now she's wondering if she can pay her mortgage. Let your breathing slow even further. Peace is coming. Just before midnight, Harvey Miller finishes the bankruptcy petition. It's hundreds of pages long, schedules of assets and liabilities, lists of creditors, organizational charts, financial statements, all the documentation required by bankruptcy court. Ian Lowitt, the chief financial officer, signs it. He's only been CFO for a few months, since June when Aaron Callan was pushed out. This isn't how he imagined his tenure would end. Signing the largest bankruptcy petition in American history. The papers are filed electronically at 1:45 a.m. on Monday, September 15th, 2008. Lehman Brothers Holdings Incorporated, founded in 1850 as a dry goods store in Montgomery, Alabama, by Henry Lehman, a German Jewish immigrant, grown into one of the world's most powerful investment banks, survivor of the Civil War, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and the attacks of September 11th, ceases to exist as an independent entity. Richard Fuld leaves his office as dawn approaches. He walks through corridors that have been his second home for 40 years, past conference rooms where he made presentations to boards and investors, past trading floors that once hummed with activity, past offices that are now dark and silent. The city is waking up. Delivery trucks rumble through empty streets. Early commuters emerge from subway stations, clutching coffee cups, checking their phones. The Monday morning world of business and ambition and striving is about to begin, but Fuld walks through it like a ghost. He gets into his car. The driver asks where to. Home, Fuld says. Take me home. In the back seat, he closes his eyes. Not to sleep. He won't sleep for days, but just to shut out the world for a moment, to exist in darkness, to not have to see or think or feel. He will testify before Congress in October. Representative Henry Waxman will ask him, "Your company is now bankrupt. Our economy is in crisis, but you get to keep $480 million. Is this fair?" Fuld will respond that he actually took only $300 million over 8 years. As if the distinction matters now. As if anyone cares about the difference between $300 million and $480 million when millions of people are losing their homes and their jobs. He will say, "Until the day they put me in the ground, I will wonder why Lehman Brothers was the only firm that was allowed to fail." And it's a fair question, isn't it? Why Lehman? Bear Stearns was rescued. AIG will be bailed out with $85 billion just one day after Lehman falls. Banks across America will receive hundreds of billions in government support through the Troubled Asset Relief Program, but Lehman is allowed to collapse. Some say it was because Paulson wanted to make an example, to show that not everyone would be saved, to enforce some discipline in the markets. Others say it was because Lehman's assets were too toxic, the losses too large, and that even if the government had wanted to help, there was no legal authority to do so. Still, others point to the personal animosity between Paulson and Fuld, the rivalry between Goldman Sachs and Lehman, and wonder if that played a role. The truth is probably some combination of all these factors, and the truth is also that we'll never know for certain. History is messy. Motives are complex. Decisions made in crisis rarely follow clean logic. But that's still weeks away. The testimony, the recriminations, the congressional hearings and investigations and lawsuits. All of that is in the future. Let yourself rest now. The story is told. The markets open Monday morning. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunges 504 points. The biggest decline since trading resumed after September 11th, the equivalent of 1,300 points by today's measure. $700 billion vanishes from retirement funds and investment accounts in a single day. $700 billion. Life savings, college funds, pensions, gone. The panic spreads across the Atlantic, across the Pacific, around the world. In London, the FTSE drops. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng plummets. In Frankfurt, the DAX collapses. Global stock markets lose $10 trillion in value following Lehman's bankruptcy. Banks stop lending to each other. The interbank lending market, that invisible network of credit that keeps the financial system functioning, freezes solid. Banks don't know who's holding toxic assets, don't know who will be next to fail, so they hoard cash, refuse to lend. The credit market seize up completely. A money market fund, the Reserve Primary Fund, announces that it's breaking the buck. Money market funds are supposed to be perfectly safe. $1 in, $1 out, plus a tiny bit of interest. But the Reserve Primary Fund held Lehman Brothers commercial paper. Now those holdings are worthless. The fund's net asset value drops below $1 per share. For the first time since the early 1980s, a major money market fund has broken the buck. Investors panic. They pull money out of money market funds in droves. Over $200 billion withdrawn in a single week. Money market funds are a key source of short-term financing for corporations. When that market freezes, companies can't make payroll, can't buy supplies, can't function. The government steps in. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees money market funds. The Federal Reserve creates emergency lending facilities. The Treasury Department proposes a $700 billion bailout program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, to purchase toxic assets from banks and stabilize the system. But the damage is done. The economy tips into recession, the Great Recession, they'll call it. The worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. By March of 2009, the Dow Jones will have fallen to 6,547, down more than 53% from its peak in October 2007. Retirement accounts tied to financial markets will have lost half their value. The unemployment rate will hit 10%. 15 million Americans out of work, millions more underemployed, working part-time when they need full-time work, working minimum wage jobs when they used to be managers or professionals. Nearly 4 million homes will be lost to foreclosure between 2008 and 2012. 4 million families displaced, neighborhoods hollowed out, communities devastated. General Motors and Chrysler will declare bankruptcy. Iceland's entire banking system will collapse. Greece, Ireland, Portugal, and Spain will teeter on the edge of sovereign debt crises. The Eurozone will nearly break apart. The reverberations will shape politics and economics for decades to come. The Tea Party movement, Occupy Wall Street, Brexit, the rise of populism across Europe and America, all of it traceable, at least in part, to the financial crisis. To the rage people felt watching bankers get bailed out while ordinary families lost everything. To the sense that the system was rigged, that the elites looked after each other while everyone else suffered. But that's history now, a story from another time, preserved like amber, forever. September 2008. Close your eyes completely now. Feel the darkness welcoming you. Richard Fuld survived, in his way. He kept his houses, the mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, the ranch in Sun Valley, Idaho. He sold his Park Avenue apartment in 2009 for $25.8 to $7 million. He started a consulting firm called Matrix Private Capital Group, offering investment advice to high-net-worth clients. He gave one speech, years later, in 2015. His first and last public appearance since the financial crash. He said, "Whatever it is, enjoy the ride. No regrets. No regrets." Think about that for a moment. After everything that happened, after 25,000 people lost their jobs, after millions lost their homes, after the global economy nearly collapsed, no regrets. Perhaps that's the only way to survive it. to tell yourself that you did your best with the information you had, that you made the decisions you thought were right at the time, that you can't change the past, so why torture yourself with what-ifs and if-onlys? Or perhaps it's a kind of self-protective delusion, a refusal to truly reckon with the consequences of your choices, a way of avoiding the crushing weight of responsibility. We don't know. We can't know. We're not inside his head. We don't feel what he feels when he wakes at 3 a.m. and stares at the ceiling. We don't hear the voice that speaks to him in the quiet moments. The trading floors of 2008 are silent now. The traders scattered to other firms, other careers, other lives. Some went to Barclays, which bought Lehman's North American investment banking and trading divisions. Some went to Nomura, which bought the Asia-Pacific operations. Some left finance entirely, went to law school or business school or started their own companies. The glass towers still stand, filled with different people making different bets, convinced their world is more stable, more rational, better regulated. Perhaps it is. After the crisis, reforms were enacted. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Stricter capital requirements for banks. Stress tests. Resolution authority. The Volcker Rule limiting proprietary trading. A Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Perhaps the lessons were learned. Perhaps the system is safer. Perhaps it won't happen again. Or perhaps, like all human institutions, the cycle continues. Ambition and fear, greed and panic. The eternal dance of markets and men, of risk and reward, of empires built in decades and lost in a weekend. Memory fades. New traders join the markets who weren't even in college in 2008. Regulations get relaxed. Leverage creeps higher. Risk builds in corners of the financial system that regulators don't fully understand. Cryptocurrencies, private credit markets, shadow banking, algorithmic trading. And somewhere, years from now, another CEO will sit in another office on another Friday afternoon, watching the numbers on the screen, feeling the confidence drain away, and wonder if history is about to repeat itself. But for tonight, let it all go. Let the story fade into memory. Feel yourself sinking into sleep, into dreams, into the peaceful darkness where no market opens, no phone rings, no empire falls. The week is over. The month is over. The crisis has passed into history, and you are safe and warm and still. The city sleeps below, the lights of Manhattan twinkling like stars in the darkness, the Hudson River flowing endlessly to the sea, time moving forward as it always does, indifferent to human drama, carrying us all toward whatever comes next. Sleep now. Just sleep. Let the weight of the day release. Let the tension in your shoulders melt away. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let yourself drift. There is nothing more to do tonight. No decisions to make, no calls to return, no crisis to manage, only rest, only peace, only the gentle descent into dreams. And in the morning, the sun will rise again, as it always has, as it always will. Life continues, the world turns, and we wake to begin again. But that's for tomorrow. For now, there is only this moment, this breath, this letting go. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. The story is complete.